Hello. Hello, all. Welcome to our not now usual Monday night generational change. This is an anomaly. As you know, this is hopefully third time's a charm, and we could get Andrew get his take on some things. I see already the hate is starting in the comments. Hi, Declan. How are you?
Hi, pretty face. I'm Peter.
I'm Jen.
And we're at Generational Change. And this will be the second to last broadcast from this current location.
Yes.
So Jen is going to be moving along. That'll be very interesting. And we have a very important conversation to have tonight. Those of you who know, did Lou do any trick-or-treating?
No, you know what? Lou is not really such a people dog. Like, she's likes us, but she doesn't. She gets scared. Like, she seems all tough, but she's really not. It's not her thing, although I do have a really cute costume for her. So let's just first, I want to talk about the Andrew Yang situation, because I already see the comments starting. So we've said this many, many times, okay? I don't have to agree with someone on everything. I just don't, in order to think that they're a decent person with good judgment and that believes in reason and science. And that's ultimately what I do find about Andrew. He's also incredibly loyal. And he's in this for the right reasons. And I just, and the thing is, let's say hypothetically, someone like Andrew Yang were the president. He would be surrounded by really, really smart people. And he wouldn't need to be the smartest person in the room because he doesn't have a gigantic ego. Let's try a president like that for a change, that just listens to experts and other people. So even though he might like something, that doesn't mean he would ever get into office and like ordain it so. Andrew is also someone that actually believes in a democratic republic. So he might like something, but if it isn't what most people want, he's not an authoritarian. So I get that people have issues here and there, but what I really do think, and I think this for most things, people just decide whether they like you or not, and then they just work backwards from that conclusion, because you could always find things and take sound bites and focus on certain things. I just finished listening to his book, Forward. I finished the audio. Did you finish reading it?
Mostly.
I have to fix this.
Okay. I got to fix my column.
So, I finished it.
Taji, listen, you present a very fair argument, which is you want to be open-minded, you want to be here, and there's some people who don't like Andrew's shtick, and that's fine. I understand. He's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. But the reality is he is a much-needed voice and a much-needed political shift that we need in this country. And he has a lot of people who want to be involved in what he's doing.
I do have to say that after getting through his book, he's more to the left. I left that out for you. He's more to the left than I had thought he was. I left that out. We're packing up my house because I'm moving.
Last time we had a real third party.
Teddy, it's Teddy. So, from listening to Andrew's book, he hugely supports labor rights and workers' rights, and is definitely he knows that is a huge part of what we need to mobilize in order to move forward. I took copious notes. I've got pages of notes with questions and things, but I did every chapter. I did notes. I did seriously copious notes. And so I would recommend it. I really would, because he is a really decent guy. I understand. And the only reason I could think maybe he comes off squirrely, he's really nerdy. And he's just like this regular guy that had to be a class clown to not be made fun of, and had all these things. But he's just a nerdy guy, who just wants to help and has some good ideas.
He's also way too upbeat and positive for people who are in politics who are extra cynical and nihilistic.
He's so not nefarious, people. He is so not nefarious.
Where's all this positivity coming from?
And I think that a lot of it is when he first came on the scene, and I'll admit, I didn't know this either. I assumed he was like a tech guy from California. There is this image of him as being like a tech guy from California. He's not.
Hey, Georgia, we can tell you that.
Absolutely, he does.
He supports the New York Health Act.
He absolutely does. And he absolutely supports single payer healthcare.
Yeah.
He supports the idea of the government being the single payer of healthcare.
So interesting, and this is something we're going to talk about with him, is the fact that when he did run for mayor of New York City, everybody came down on him with a heavy hammer with his comments on Israel, but nobody, and I mean nobody, made a peep about the fact that he was the one person who ran for mayor who supported the New York Health Act. As far as I'm concerned, that really tells you everything, but it also tells you that one of the biggest problems on the left is the inability to really build a cohesive movement.
Because every little purification test and every little problem, nobody's getting into office and just waving their magic wand and having the world their way. That's not how this works. So like the best we can do is elect people that are not nefarious, that use good judgment, don't need to be the smartest person in the room, and will work with people to attain solutions to benefit the majority of people. That's what he's wanting to do. You might not agree with some of the things that his goal is to make life better. He thinks that we should be not ranking ourselves based on GDP. He thinks we should be like in Bhutan, in the country of Bhutan, and he didn't mention this, but they do. They measure gross national happiness. His idea of human-centered capitalism means we benefit and have capitalism just for existing, basically.
Well, again, I think
and have the country work for us.
Yeah, and I think, again, the whole concept of having a hybrid system, which is something that I advocate for, I believe you advocate for, is basically a capitalist system with a socialist safety net. And that is what you need. You need a hybrid system of socialism and capitalism. It's the only way it can work.
You did send the link, right?
Yes, I did send the link. Okay. Do we want to check our email just to be absolutely certain?
I checked it like twice.
Didn't see anything back or not, but usually they're very good about it.
They're usually pretty on top of it.
Yes, especially if there is anything that has come up.
No, like
so in this case, it does not seem to be the case. But it is exactly 6:30 now, so obviously we will give it a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's...
I haven't gotten anything.
Doesn't appear to be anything there. And if necessary, you'll text him if you have to.
I will.
That'll be worst case.
I'll text him if I need to. I try not to do that with people that I know.
Well, yes, but this is a different circumstance. And so we've obviously wanted to have this conversation for a while, and we know that a lot of people are obviously hesitant about Andrew, but I'm not.
I'm not either. And I also want to point out that I don't hold myself out to be a journalist. Like I'm not we will constantly espouse what we stand for, what we're promoting, what we're trying to achieve. And we will work with anybody if it will facilitate what we're trying to do. Yeah. But I'm not a journalist. I don't need to overly criticize and that's not my function. My function is to build bridges, coalitions, and be in bed with as many decent people as possible that want the same things that I want. And he is one of those people. So, that's just the way it is. So we will ask questions about corporate financing. Obviously, I don't support that. But we'll hear what he says, but I will not just write him off just because I don't know, sound bites here and there when I know him and he's a good guy.
Thank you, John. Apparently there was an echo issue with one of our phones or both of our phones. So obviously I'm too close to the microphone may have been an issue. So hopefully that's not an issue, but we have them removed, John. So hope you're doing well. Great to see everybody. And again, the importance of having these conversations and the importance of building these relationships. And that's, again, one of the most admirable things about Andrew. He is looking to build as many relationships as possible with as many people as possible. And that, to me, is really what it's about.
All right. I'm getting my copious notes ready. Andrew just popped on. And but before we go, I just want people to know this because I don't want to waste time during our talking to Andrew, just going over it. There are 6 main principles of the Forward Party. And the concept isn't everybody leaves the Dems and the Republicans and switches over. This isn't it. Like, imagine this is like if we were a Venn diagram, it could overlap because do you believe in these principles, right? So it's open primaries and ranked choice voting. We've been promoting that since the very beginning. It's fact-based governance, which is we should all be working from the same set of facts to make reasonable decisions. That okay? It's human-centered capitalism, which is us profiting off of what is ours and ourselves and not having to be like slaves to a system. It's effective and modern government, and this is something that's really interesting because I don't know that anybody can make government sound remotely fun, but Andrew has this idea that yes, it should be much more user-friendly, which it should. The 5th is UBI. And the last one is what we're going to say, he calls it grace and tolerance. And I'm going to say, just don't be haters, just don't be haters. But anyway, so everyone knows who Andrew is. We don't need to do a whole fancy introduction, but everybody, we're here to be, open.
Venture for America, Humanity Forward, ran for president of the United States in 2020, ran for mayor of New York City in 2021. And of course, now he is the commander-in-chief of what hopefully will be the legitimate and prosperous third party movement in the United States for the Forward Party. Welcome, Andrew Yang, to Generational Change.
Hey guys, well, I overheard the intro and I appreciated it so much. It's so wonderful to be here.
Oh, we're glad. Look, we know that I say that Andrew it's one of those big eyes, small stomach things, I think, with your schedule that like you're so all over the place and doing so many things. And that's what it is. Like we never took it personally or got offended or anything like that.
Well, thank you for the understanding, Jen. I will say that I was very guilty and conscience ridden, where I said to my team, I was like, hey, I really, really need to make it up to Jen. But thank you for understanding.
No, I appreciate it. And I want to thank you for personally reading me your book because everyone knows I now am an audio person. I feel a little lazy, but I really appreciate it. So I actually got to hear you tell your book, which I really did appreciate.
And thank you for the shout out for Jen. That was
yes. I'm just sitting there and it's like chapter 14, people. It mentions me in chapter 14.
As it should. Jen had a real impact on me because you're so awesome, and your running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz was to me such a fantastic contrast. I don't know. But then I realized that people were scared of Debbie or scared of challenging the establishment, you truly did represent generational change. So I was very happy to support, but also talk about you in the book as someone who was an awesome role model.
I appreciate it. And one of the things that I admire most about you is you are someone that always brings people up with you. You are not someone who's threatened by other people's success. So like you will go out of your way to lift other people up. And not a lot of people do that when they're still trying to do their own thing as well. So I appreciate that. And not a lot of people do that, especially in this.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Jen. Well, certainly I'd love to be out of this line of work. So the sooner we can get other people freaking, in there doing great stuff. And I'm so glad that you opened up with open primaries and ranked choice voting. I'm becoming increasingly fixated on the sense that this duopoly is a disaster and so many people know it. And you experienced it in your own way, taking on the establishment the way that you did. And so to me, if enough of us get together and say, look, we can disagree on a lot of other stuff, but we just need to settle on the fact that this system is not working at all. And then we change it, and then we can sort out what happens next. I just had a conversation with some people today who were like, look, love what you're about, not sold on universal basic income. And I was like, well, how about we just fix this fucking system and then we can figure out the rest.
Right. I was just saying that before you came on. People will clamp onto one soundbite of one opinion of one thing you said. And you know how this works, and that'll be whatever touches them the wrong way. I think it's usually people just decide they don't like somebody and kind of want to work backward and look for things because we all have those things. Like there's nobody that's ideal. And what I always say to everybody about you is that you are a person who would be in an executive position using reason and logic and being around smart people and not needing to be the smartest person in the room and just really wanting to find solutions. And there's nothing authoritarian about you. So I say with people, you might not like what he's suggesting, but he wouldn't be somebody that would come in and be some authoritarian that would make you have this. So it's just so interesting how people get so caught up in an idea and don't look at just the process of working with people and building this.
Well, thanks, Jen. One of the lessons I learned, in some ways the hard way over the last several years, is that so much of politics now is about symbols and trying to convey values, in part because we've kind of given up hope that we'll actually be able to change some of the policies in a meaningful way. So and social media. If someone does something that you disagree with, and all of a sudden it becomes really very much about, I guess, the symbols or values that person's associated with. And, it's like the thing that most people don't realize that you realize is that it turns out we're actually human beings, behind the social media avatars or behind the this and that. And someone asked me the other day about my brand or whatever. And I decided to say to them, I was like, to me, I'm not a brand. To me, I'm actually a guy or a human being or a dad or whatever it is. But from the outside looking in, I think people do tend to see us as not really human beings, but more kind of values representations.
That's one of the problems, is this sort of idolatry that we see with people being put on pedestals, politicians. And then when someone doesn't 100% do what you want, oh, they're a sellout. Can't have them. Got to throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know. And there's no nuance. Like, nuance is completely dead. Everything is black or white, and it's so much infighting. And you know, and I know the cause of the infighting. It's purposeful in a lot of cases, and it's also born out of desperation, because obviously we're in a bad way. Like, we're in a bad way, but they're blaming the wrong people, or blaming people in general, and not looking at the bigger problem.
The system is the villain. It's like it's making us regard other people as heroes and villains, or generally villains, honestly. But but the system is the villain. It's like we have. It's like the movie where you're in an arena against each other, and really, like, the problem is that you're all in the arena. There's like a puppet master backstage. You know, I guess I'm thinking of Joaquin Phoenix and Gladiator or something like that. But I don't know what your favorite movie is with the setup.
You love to reference, and so funny, like, you would probably really get along with my husband. You really do like the Star Wars stuff. And you have a lot of references to things that would be a little sci-fi geeky. I might say.
Guilty as charged. Sorry.
But I really appreciate it, because I live in a house of those people.
Well, let's talk about the most important issue, which
Yes.
is, of course, the New York Knicks. I mean, obviously, they're off to a great start, and figured you'd be pretty excited to at least give a quick shout out for your favorite basketball team.
Oh, my former favorite basketball team, because I was a diehard Knicks fan for my entire adolescence and then young adult life, and I was in the Garden for the 4-point play. But after they dumped Jeremy Lin, I just can't handle this anymore. And then the owner kicked Oakley out, and like, there's all this, like, the sexual harassment thing. The whole thing was just became so bizarre. So I, you know, was fascinating is I ended up in some kind of low-level feud with James Dolan, where, like, I said something about how we should sell the Knicks, which is a very mainstream opinion, by the way. And then the MSG network put out, like, a negative story about me when I was running for president, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like the official, like, you know, Knicks communication arm has an opinion on Andrew Yang, the presidential candidate, because I said something about. So anyway, super psyched for the Knicks. I think the Bing Bong social media celebration is hysterical. I think they're for real. I think that this success is sustainable. I'm just for anything that makes people happy, especially here in New York. I am now a Nets fan, in part because I'm friendly with some of the people that are associated with that team. And so, you know, like, right now the Knicks are outdoing the Nets, though, and, you know, hats off to them.
I think sports is a great way of bringing people together, quite frankly.
Okay.
I've always felt that way. But I am curious, Andrew, because I think more than anything else, a lot of people are yearning for a new path. It's pretty obvious that the two-party duopoly is not only broken, but it's dividing this country in such a way that, as you suggested, and I did just listen, fantastic podcast with Brianna Joy Gray, guys. Also recommend checking that out. This idea that it could get violent. And I do think we're not that far away from that. Can you talk about what it's been like being on the road for the past month, spreading the word about the Forward Party and the reception you've been getting? Obviously, we saw how things worked out in D.C., which was great. Saw Marianne Williamson had showed up. Then, of course, you went to, I believe it was Dallas, and Mark Cuban showed up. So it looks like there really is interest here. And the one thing I try to emphasize to so many people when it comes to this third-party movement, it needs credibility. With all due respect to some of the other groups that are out there trying to do the same thing, credibility is everything. You have to have people believe that what you're doing is legit and it can work, and what that experience has been like for you so far.
Well, thanks. First, I just want to tip my hat to all the people that have been grinding with a third-party effort of any kind over this last period of time, because anyone who does that is doing it for sincere passion and belief that it's going to help, because there's no incentive behind it. You know, as soon as you leave the two-party system and you try and do something else, everyone marginalizes and ridicules you and thinks that you have no chance to do anything. So why would you do it? You must really think it's the right thing to do. So the reception I've gotten has been really fantastic. I'd say some people are curious or intrigued, and then other people are just super enthusiastic. That's been the spectrum. Of course, keep in mind, I'm doing events where people choose to show up. So if you were truly, against the the idea you might not show up, but the people that have been showing up have been wonderful and really phenomenal people, passionate, optimistic, engaged. A lot of ranked choice voting organization volunteers. Like my book events have actually doubled as ranked choice voting volunteer sign-up events, which has made me very happy. Organizations like Fair Vote, and I joined the board of the Fair Vote Action Network, which is their action C4 org. But Fair Vote volunteers would show up to our events and then walk away with clipboards full of volunteers who wanted to actually try and make it happen in Broomfield, Colorado, or the state of California, or wherever. So it's been a blast. It's been so much fun that I got to get back out there. Honestly, we're working on a new set of dates. Maybe we'll head down to your neck of the woods. I'll probably do a Miami or Fort Lauderdale event in December. There is an event in New York City, November 13th, that just went up, and I'm sure I'll end up doing a bunch of places between November and December. But I had a wonderful time meeting people. There's been a lot of joy, a lot of reminiscing, because some of the people that have showed up worked on my presidential campaign. It's been a great time.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate. Like I said, people, the book is forward. And if you are like me, the audio version is Andrew. So, which I like it. Like
I did sit there and record it for 3 days. That's true. That did happen.
No. And it's appreciated. And something that really I found very interesting, and it's not something that's sexy and people don't talk about a lot, but the idea of the death of local journalism and this idea of publicly funding that again, like publicly funding local journalism, and why that would be so important. And this is something that gets no attention whatsoever, and yet it is part of one of the biggest problems that we have. Would you talk about that?
Well, you can talk about your experience running for Congress, Jen. It's like, who's covering you? In theory, it would be local papers, but the local papers have been so gutted. And now they're under-resourced and understaffed in various ways. 2,000 local papers have gone out of business. And you have the same number of local news deserts. And if you have a local news desert, a number of things happen. Number one, people become more polarized because all you do at that point is tune into cable news. People vote at lower levels. People run for office at lower levels. Corruption goes up. The cost of municipal bonds in these towns goes up. I mean, it's fairly direct, the relationship. And so I liken local journalism to like your town library, where you love your town library, I'm guessing. You're really glad it's there. No one thinks that the town library is supposed to make money every period. You realize that there's some public utility to it. So I suggest that we try to adopt a similar public-private model for local journalism, particularly because a lot of these local communities could support a journalistic enterprise or organization as long as it wasn't expected to generate stock market like returns. You know what I mean? Like a lot of them could break even on an operating basis.
Right. I just think it's really smart. It reminded me of like Mr. Rogers, but for the journalist sect. Like it's the idea of PBS at a local journalism level. And it also gets to that idea within what you're talking about in general with the 6 concepts, this fact-based governance. And we joke about this, the truthiness of this and fact, we've been mocking this for so long, but it really has gotten out of
control. It's a real problem, truly. And it's hard to have any kind of honest governance if no one can agree on a baseline. And local journalism historically has been more trusted and less polarizing because you can't really front that much about what's going on in your town. You can't make shit up as much.
Right. People can see for themselves.
Yeah. There are only so many ways to report on like a bridge needing repairs or, a set of issues. I mean, it genuinely helped depoliticize us and keep us from being as polarized as we are now ideologically.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no question that the systemic takeover of local newspapers is something that we have seen. In Florida, the Sun Sentinel, which is the newspaper which covers Palm Beach County and Broward County here in South Florida, when Jen did what you would call sort of a debate, but it wouldn't even necessarily
It was not a debate.
It was basically a tea party for Wasserman Schultz and the writers of the Sun Sentinel, and Jen just happened to be there while the pleasantries were being shared. But the worst one was actually, I won't name the person, but was a writer for the Miami Herald who, under the pretenses of, and this actually happened, Wasserman Schultz committed a federal violation by linking Jen's name to her federal website,
to her congressional webpage. She took two of my, she took jenperlman.com and jenforcongress.com, and they went to her congressional website. So the reporter from the Herald, under the guise of wanting to talk about that. So I spoke with him about that, and then
much, again, it's like much like the whipped cream story. It's like people just want to focus on the stuff that is, catchy and gonna, get clicks. So the idea that Wasserman Schultz was doing something like this, people were thinking, all right, well, this will get clicks. But as it turns out, that never even got mentioned in the article. The article was basically to sandbag her and say what a phony candidate, she isn't going to win, and she's wasting time. And I was like, oh my God.
And yet all he and I talked about was this thing with the domain name. So, he came to a whole lot of conclusions.
He's like, this ain't 2016. You're not raising a lot of money.
Right.
And I'm just thinking, this is why local journalism is dead. It's because it's not about doing journalism. It's about kowtowing to local power. And that's a very big problem. And that's why that chapter was so vital, just talking about the importance of getting back to the roots of local journalism and supporting it. And I think that whole concept could be very vital in terms of how we can grow at the local level, because that's really everything in a lot of ways, if you think about it.
Yeah, it's one of the only paths out of where we are now. And my interactions with PBS and NPR stations in particular was very, very positive. The trust level in communities towards what people, I think, barely recognize as public journalism, in the sense, when I talk about this, people are like, oh, you can't have publicly supported journalism. And then the same people love NPR and PBS. Right. It's really like a sign of the times where, in part because NPR and PBS have been with us for a while, folks don't think of them in the same light, but know that they actually get the highest marks among most media sources for being nonpartisan, and they receive public funds at their inception.
Yeah, I loved how you also were loving on C-SPAN. Because I had a love affair at one point with C-SPAN, in my very political dorky days when I would sit there and watch Washington Roundtable every morning. But I
do like C-SPAN. That's true.
I know. But it's definitely on the drier side of programming.
Andrew, what does it say from your perspective? And you mentioned it in the book about the fact that 70% of Democratic voters trust corporate media, whereas 15% of Republican voters, and I think it's like 25% of independent voters, trust corporate media. Why do you think that is?
I think, unfortunately, the media and the Democratic Party have become kind of hand in glove, and people sense it. The most obvious example for most people is when they all sandbagged Bernie in 2016, and they kind of did the same thing again in 2020. I mean, it wasn't a one-time thing. I talk about in my book how an MSNBC producer was given a list of candidates not to interview. I was on that list, so kudos to me, I guess. but there's there's very much a partnership going on between certain media organizations and the Democratic Party, and there are some people that have gotten turned off by that and just think, I don't know if I believe these media organizations anymore. But a lot of the Democrats still do believe. And I try not to be too judgmental or conspiracy theorist-y about this stuff. I mean, because I've been part of these media orgs, and I think a lot of them are not knowingly corrupt. They're just sort of out of touch, and then some of them are corrupt. I try not to, paint everyone with a broad brush. But at this point, you have to acknowledge that there's some shenanigans going on, and when push comes to shove, they're never going to give someone like you, Jen, or Bernie, or other people a fair shake. And so what the heck happens then? I have a running thesis now that people have been casting about for some kind of fix because they've been losing hope and don't think our government's working, and the duopoly is screwing us all and the rest of it. And so they just keep on casting about for various candidates who can fix it. And so Bernie got a lot of that energy. Trump, I'd say unfortunately absorbed a lot of that energy. But they just keep on casting about for the solution. And there's this institutional layer that includes the media, to the point of this question, that's trying to be like, nothing to see here, tamp it down, tamp it down. And people are getting more and more fed up, and it just keeps on oscillating. There's this political scientist who just told me this thing called it's like the thermostatic public opinion, where it just it gets like too hot, too cold, too hot, too cold. They just like keep passing it back and forth because they're not able to find like the right temperature. And so I think that's what's gone on in part with our relationship with the media, is that there's some people that have just decided that the media is bullshit and the rest of it, and then others who believe every word, and the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And I really think that what makes your move very credible is because of the fact that the corporate media came down on you very hard as soon as you announced. Whereas these other organizations, again, don't have to name them, but wasn't even given any acknowledgement. Not only did they acknowledge yours, they wanted to make it very clear. Saw the article in the Daily Beast and a couple of other places where they basically are, trying to cast you as a heretic. And of course, that's the people who are afraid that you might actually turn this into something big are going to cast you as somebody who basically shouldn't be taken seriously. And so I really do think that what you have done, and this is something that we try to do, is just build as many of these coalition relationships, this broad spectrum. If you could talk about, because I really do think that if you were to get the likes of like a Marianne Williamson, a Joe Rogan, a Dave Chappelle, a Mark Cuban to really back what you're doing, I think this could take off like a rocket ship, to be honest, because I think people are looking for that path that, it's like they don't want to jump in the water. They don't know what the temperature is, but if it's safe, they'll get in.
They're scared.
They're scared.
They're very scared.
But if any momentum starts, if they believe that there's something to this and that we might be able to get somewhere, I'm telling you, I really think that people are looking for something, and this could really take off. What are your thoughts on the importance of those type of influencers that could really help build this thing out?
I think you're right on all accounts. I took any negative press I got with the launch of the Forward Party really, really positively. In large part because I marveled at the fact that people felt like they had to address it. You know what I mean? Like the main thing you'd fear is just that everyone ignores it and no one gives a shit. Which, by the way, is what happened when I decided to run for president back in 2017, 2018.
I loved listening to that. I loved listening to you tell this story about showing up at things. Like it was some of it. It's really funny. Well, you read it. I listened. It was really funny. I'm sorry. I digress. Continue.
No, yeah, I tried to make it as honest and relatable as I could. So the contrast between being an anonymous presidential candidate, where everyone was like, "Who, what?" Like not even who, what. Says no one even acknowledged it. Everyone ignored it. Whereas this time, even being attacked is a massive win, because you're like, oh, people felt a need to address it. And it is now very mainstream. Like I just walk the streets of New York or any other place, and they say, like, people just yell independent at me. Like everyone knows I started a third party. And so everyone is waiting and seeing, in the sense that if we get momentum, people will be super jazzed to jump on board, because no one actually likes either the Democratic or the Republican one. That's like the secret. Like,
it's true.
Yeah. So if we get a wind at our backs, like, we can grow to the moon for sure. It's been fun. It's like the early adopters are wonderful, amazing people. And some of the folks that you just named are very warm to it, truly.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about how the party works in conjunction with the current duopoly, because obviously this isn't something that happens overnight. Obviously, this isn't, people are not going to, we live in a closed primary state, right? So I'm not going to just unregister as a Dem, because then I don't get to vote in a primary. So like, we're still kind of stuck where we are, but how can this coexist, and how can we support from where we are right now?
Yeah, to your point, Jen, and I say this very explicitly, you don't need to change your party registration, because doing so would decrease your influence. And who wants that? Like our job has to be to enable it such that you can have different parties emerge. And there are two main ways we can do that. Number one, support candidates who are aligned, and they can be running as Democrats or independents or Republicans or Forward or whatever. But truth is that if you ran as a forwardist right now, it doesn't help you that much. So most people won't choose to do it. It's very, again, practical. So we're going to support candidates. And one of the wonderful things is that I can support a candidate who's running under either ticket at this point, if they're great. I'm meeting with an independent tomorrow who's fantastic. So that's path number one. And path number two is supporting ballot initiatives, either locally or at the state level, that help make the process change around ranked choice voting or open primaries. And we can do that just as ordinary Americans. We could actually do that in not just our own community, but in other states if we decided to do so. So that can include donating, calling, volunteering, the usual array of activities to try and get something done. And you can do these things, again, without changing your party registration. This is an inclusive, popular movement. Everyone's welcome. Anyone who's fed up with stuff is welcome. And again, you don't need to be on board with anything other than the fact that the system itself needs to get fixed. And I know a lot of people that are fans of yours approach this from what you would consider the left, even though I try and avoid ideological buckets in this way. But you just heard my conversation with Brianna, who's very sympathetic. Anyone who is pissed off at the corporate Democratic Party and wants to see it change, let's just make these changes, and then we can have different points of view emerge. Because I genuinely think if you unleashed the popular will, things look very, very different than they do now. The corporate Democrats don't really speak for that many people.
So let's ask the hard question. Where are you on if you're going to take corporate money or not? Because our thing here is we're nonpartisan. We will platform people that are not beholden to corporate special interests. And that is something that people want to know up front. So where are you on that?
Well, we haven't accepted any money right now that's not from just a normal human. It's just been grassroots donations. The maximum you can donate to the Forward Party hard pack right now is only $5,000. And everything we get, we're going to end up sharing so people can see who the individuals are. We're competing against an infrastructure that has, I don't know, $6 billion, $14 billion. If someone were to come along and say, hey, Andrew, you're right, the duopoly is terrible, and I want to give you $100 million or whatnot, as long as I could say who the person was, I would take it, honestly.
Right, but I'm talking about that's not from an industry. It's not from Raytheon and the military pack or, Wall Street or Big Pharma. Those kinds of.
We don't want to take anything from corporate players. We just want there to be a human involved.
Okay.
And Andrew, I agree. I mean, if Mark Cuban, for
right,
example,
if somebody like that wants to,
who's worth about $4 billion, decides, Andrew, I'm going to give you $100 million. I really believe in this project. I think it absolutely is necessary. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a person who is a forward thinker, no pun intended.
Well, look, Michael Bloomberg bought the Democratic Party, so why couldn't somebody buy it?
Well, again, and it isn't about buying the party, it's about buying an idea. And if you believe in the idea, then there's no telling how far it could go. That's what I think a lot of people have a hard time differentiating between. Somebody can raise hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, just bundling a whole bunch of, individual PAC donations because they really believe in the cause. Whereas somebody who just works for, let's say Northrop Grumman or, Lockheed Martin decides, I'm going to write a check for 50 million because I don't want this, that, and the other thing. I think that's
nefarious.
Important. And one thing that I think is very important, Andrew, and we talk about this a lot, there really is a lot of camaraderie that I think has not really been tapped into between progressives and libertarians. I really think there's a lot of things that they agree on. There's obviously a lot of differences for sure, but I really think that there's a lot of core issues that are there that really could be harnessed. And you really cast a very wide net with the concept of the Forward Party. Can you talk about your perspective of the similarities that do exist between progressives and libertarians and the opportunity to bring more of them together?
Oh, for sure. I'm happy to say supporters who consider themselves progressives and those who consider themselves libertarians. And one thing that definitely unifies them is that they don't think either of the two current parties is speaking for them. That they're both anti-corruption, to your point about all the corporate money and whatnot that's flooding in. They both want to see more of the resources flow to people and families and communities rather than stuck in the pipes So that's something that a lot of people detest about our current system. And so hopefully if we can get the progressives and the libertarians aligned over the fact that, look, don't agree on everything, but we agree that we each deserve a voice, that there should be a major political party that represents that point of view, that is not getting suppressed and marginalized by the duopoly at every turn, by the media at every turn, then we really can build a majority pretty quickly. So it's been exciting. These ideological buckets, to your point, really end up being kind of overlapping for a lot of people. Folks talk about how politics isn't a spectrum, it's like a U, and you end up meeting again on the sides. It's, people talk about how a lot of Bernie supporters were kind of Trump sympathetic as one example, because they shared this kind of anti-institutional sentiment.
No, it's true. One of the key things in the book that you talk about is this idea that, and I'm just going to paraphrase, we measure the wrong things in this country. And so when we're making policy and we're trying to move forward, we have what we're measuring is, first of all, not things that are important to our existence, but also we're not able to see how anything is actually working. And I like the idea that we measure things like GNP, right? GDP. But what we should be measuring is national well-being. And what does that look like? And so would you talk a little bit about like how we're not able to move forward until we're measuring the right things, like setting some benchmarks?
Well, I have this thesis that people have been getting more and more fed up and pissed off because our standard of living has been deteriorating, and neither party has been able to deliver. So we're 28th on things like infant mortality, access to clean drinking water, quality public education, life expectancy, the basics, like the stuff that you really ought to be evaluating yourself based on. And so if you're 28th and declining, then you're going to get more and more angry and frustrated and ticked off. And then meanwhile, people will be telling us how well things are going because the stock market's up and GDP is up. And you have this one measurement around headline unemployment rate that is very misleading. And so if we even just reported on a quarterly basis the way we do stock market prices, being like, hey, how are schools now? Same as last time, pretty lousy. That it's like harder for leaders to be like, it's great. And like, where this is like, hey, like our air and water quality are declining. The basics is even if you just had those measures out there getting publicly communicated every period, it would be a game changer, I think, because then you couldn't blanch away from the hard reality of how our way of life has been declining and our leaders have not been doing shit all about it. And then the leadership can't just cast blame on the other side for your declining quality of life because it's been happening under both parties. Guess what? You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I find really frustrating around like this very ideological blaming of the other side. It's like, I was reading Matt Taibbi's argument with someone else about how like kind of Obama opened the door for Trumpism. And I thought that there was a lot of truth to it. It's like, how the hell does Donald Trump become even a viable challenger? It's because we've been failing the American people in various ways for a long, long time. And Matt Taibbi's argument was around our failed response to the financial crisis, which I will say really did make a lot of Americans think that the economy's rigged, the game is rigged, and that if you run a big bank, you can just skate and the rest of it. I remember being disgusted by that whole thing. It was something that changed my direction in life. So it's funny, guys, like after the financial crisis, my big reaction was to start Venture for America. I thought like, okay, I'm going to start a nonprofit that helps channel people to the Midwest and the South and like try and make some jobs. And then after Trump wins, then my reaction is to run for president. so like I kept getting radicalized by various things.
Trump existed because people, when they are desperate, will crave and will go towards authoritarianism. That's what happens. When people get desperate, they look for a savior. And anybody who puts out that they've got it all under control and they're the one, people will follow that. And that's what happened. And people will only follow that when they're miserable and desperate. When people's basic needs are being met, they're not going to follow some, authoritarian into the woods. That's what I think. So we need to look at the system.
I think history agrees with you, Jen. I think this is played out in different places at different times.
Yeah, we've seen it all over the place. But talk about what is human-centered capitalism.
Oh, it's measuring things based on how we're doing, really, just measured by human progress. So if we're healthier and mentally healthier, and our air and water are better, and we're more optimistic, and our kids' outcomes are going to be better than ours, then we're pretty happy. The American dream to me is just, are your kids going to be better off than you? And right now, most of us would struggle to say, yeah, our kids are going to be better off than us, and that will lead you to some terrible times and like terrible leadership if the critical mass of people don't feel like their kids are going to have better lives. So if you measured progress by how we are doing, then you have a different sense as to whether we're getting better or worse.
Mute me. He muted me because he thinks my dog's about to bark,
Well,
which is a possibility.
Preemptive dog muting. I got it.
Like she was getting geared up, but I found a lot of this interesting, and I know you don't have it in front of you, but I did take very copious notes. And in this, and by the way, for anybody interested, this is chapter 19. So there are three main points that I got from human-centered capitalism, people, and it's humanity is more important than money. Unit of economy is each person, not each dollar. And markets exist to serve our common goals and interests. So that's sounding very much like somebody who's caring about the collective good, which, sounds a little socialistic, sounding a little bit like wanting everybody to do well. I don't know.
I think we should be measuring how we're doing and want everyone to do well. And if you actually geared your economy to that, then it would look very, very different than it does now. That's sort of that way.
Yeah, I really think that the hybrid systems that we have in various parts of the world, whether, Germany, Japan, Australia, even Scandinavia, they really have, and you look at the quality of life and the overall happiness index.
Yes.
I mean, that in a lot of ways really is it. And it's
Bhutan.
Bhutan.
They measure gross national happiness.
Yeah.
They actually do.
And it leads you to want things like universal healthcare, which I do, and universal basic income, which I do, and like a lot of other things that I think would improve our quality of life pretty quickly. I don't know how you all feel where you are in Florida, but I feel like we're in a bit of an optimism recession right now. Like people are very down to the dumps. Is that happening now?
They're nihilists. That's what's happened. A lot of the people.
I really want to jump into this, Andrew, because I do want to, slightly talk about your race for mayor. And I really do think overall, I think that the nihilism of the left befell upon you much as it did Nina Turner. I think that there is this, you're never going to be good enough.
You're not pure
satisfy.
enough. You're not pure enough.
There's always going to be
something. You said this, you did this.
And so if people disagreed with you on your statement about Israel,
yes,
but didn't have enough foresight to recognize that you were the one candidate who did two things in the race for mayor that actually matters. You supported the New York Health Act, and you were the only person who actually tried to make actual use of ranked choice voting. As far as I can tell, those are the things that really matter.
Right.
And because of your selflessness, you almost made Catherine Garcia the mayor of New York City, despite the fact the entire machine tried to put Eric Adams in there. And had you not done what you did, who knows what a margin he would have won by. But it really came down to the wire. And that was because of your selflessness to say, look, if it can't be me, let's at least have it be somebody who will move the needle in the right direction, much more so than this other person who is definitely not going to do that. And I don't think enough people really gave you enough credit for really focusing on those two particular areas.
Yeah.
They only want to focus on the negative. And to me,
it's all about Israel.
That's the part about the left that really eats at us in particular. There is a lack of understanding about coalition building that has to change if we're ever going to get anywhere. Your thoughts on that?
I was talking to a progressive friend of mine who's done a lot for progressive causes. And he said something that stuck with me. He said, you can do 20 things that they agree with. And then if they disagree with the 21st thing, it's like the other 20 things didn't matter. That was what he said. And so he, felt very kind of disillusioned and a bit burnt. I appreciate your perspective a great deal. I certainly think that if someone disagrees with me on something very passionately, it can be taken in the context of like, hey, like really disagree with Yang on this thing. But there are other things I'm down with and a fan of. One thing I saw that maybe influenced me a little bit is that folks, for whatever reason, seemed more down on me than Eric Adams, even though like to me, I thought that was like no contest in a particular way. It's like people didn't seem to be focusing on like what positive you'd want. It's like, okay, you're not a Yang fan, I get it. Like who you want to elevate, like who, and people seem more intent on just being like, let's just try and drag someone down and like not focus on building someone up or the other candidates that might end up in this case mayor. It's like that.
Well, that's what I said in the beginning. People decide that they don't like you, and then they will work backwards from that conclusion. They'll find because given, and especially like you've said, we're having two different narratives that were or at least two. There's multiple narratives, and we're in our own little like thought bubbles. And so people they like you or they don't. And they will then find the news and the comments and the little sound bites that will suit that narrative that they create. Because no one is pure, by anyone. No one's going to agree with you on everything. And I just are fixated on that.
And the same thing befell Dianne Morales, who we thought was, a really strong progressive candidate, obviously up until the end with everything that happened, and, accused her of not giving in to the whole demands about the unions and that type of stuff. I mean, look, New York City politics, it's tough. It's very tough. And again, it's very entrenched, extremely entrenched. And I think that you were really scaring the hell out of them for quite a while. And they really had to go all hands on deck. And maybe New York City isn't the answer. I think the whole idea of this broader nationwide coalition, because a lot of people are really against like this whole idea of the centralized planning of politics. It's really a big problem. I think the whole idea of decentralizing and reaching out to people who live, frankly, New York City, you only have to go west about, 30, 40 miles, and you're in a whole other world, whether in West Jersey or
probably less than 30 miles.
Probably less.
Well, you talk a lot about that, how the Democrats ignore so many regions that are those regions that we would have a lot in common with people, but they ignore them.
Probably a lot of folks you talked to, Jen, when you were campaigning, just like everyday Floridians who have like the same concerns as a lot of people I'm sure I met in Ohio or New Hampshire. One of the things that I think you both know is that I wrote this book forward last year, and it was probably clear from reading the book that I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, and I decided to run for mayor. But like I'm very focused on a lot of these national issues because I see how nasty it's going to get, and my journey through the presidential campaign was not encouraging in many respects. like it didn't make me think like, oh, we've got this thing under control. It actually made me think, wow, we're in for a very, very rough time. So I'm thrilled to build the Forward Party because I feel like it's well overdue. A lot of Americans want something like it. Just the question is whether we can build it big enough, fast enough to have an impact in the time we have, in part because of what, again, I'm going to return to is like, you sense that there is a little bit of an optimism recession going on out there. Like, I think there's like an emotional climate where people are ready to believe the worst of people and are a little bit, I think, emotionally exhausted or tapped out, which I kind of get. And I think it is a product of our media environment and the polarization of the period where people just feel like if you engage, you're just going to wind up really angry or depressed or some version of that. And so a lot of people are trying to pull back, which is something that, again, I totally understand. And one of the things I say to folks is like, look, we're all human beings and like, you need a break sometimes. But I said to someone else that just like if you start a business during a recession, people think it's a bad idea. And then those are the most successful businesses historically. I feel the same about this movement where it's like you started in a tough time. We are getting a lot of people super excited. And I tweeted the other day, it's like everyone I meet who's joining the Forward Party is awesome. And it's true. Everyone I meet who's joining the Forward Party is awesome.
How far away is something like having candidates and having ballot access in, certain places?
Oh, I think we're going to get there in this cycle in the next 12 months for sure. I just had a really exciting meeting today with some people who, by the way, have been working on ballot access in particular places for a while and just want to link up with the Forward Party. There's a lot of third-party energy one thing, again, I love about the third party folks I'm meeting is that they are mission driven. They're not territorial at all. They're like, hey, let's work together. It's been a joy.
Yeah. Thank you, Doug, for appreciating that. And, you know, I'm tired of the people chit-chatting about Israel in the chat. Really, seriously, people, get over it. Here's the thing. If Andrew Yang became president tomorrow, he's not going to go after Israel. Okay. Let it be, people. You're fixating on it. And I, you know what? We all make comments that we shouldn't necessarily make. And I don't even know, because I'm not on Twitter. So I don't even know what it was. But anyway, move on.
You're not on Twitter? Good for you, Jen. No wonder you're so sane.
I'm not on there at all.
We basically have reduced it. We unfortunately had a situation that arose a little over a month ago, but you know what?
Oh, it was way longer than that at this point.
About 2 months ago, but it kind of crystallized at that moment that, you know what? You need to post on social media. And frankly, guys, if you're out there, you should post like Andrew does. Pretty much everything he posts is positive.
Exactly.
And trying to find the silver lining, even if it isn't there.
I'm trying to find solutions and stop hating. But I got off like 10 months ago. I haven't been on social media.
The negativity there. And I really think that the echo chamber of social media, I mean, listen, it's a great avenue to connect with people and meet.
It's vile.
But overall, it's become exceptionally toxic. And Andrew, knowing all that you know, especially in the tech world, and I think this is a very important topic that doesn't get talked about enough, is the issue with the control of the algorithm and what actually gets pushed to the front, the type of topics that end up getting talked about versus the topics that should be talked about. It's kind of like on social media or even on some of these independent YouTube channels. If you want to talk about issues like the Forward Party and how we get ranked choice voting and we get open primaries on the ballot throughout the United States, that's not going to draw a lot of attention. But if you start, shit talking another YouTube channel, they are going to boost that algorithm up way, way high. Oh, drama. Oh, yes. Oh, good drama.
They like us all fighting. It's sadistic.
Mm-hmm. Yes and yes. And I do talk about this in my book, where negative sentiment and even misinformation spread 6 times more powerfully and quickly than truth. And I do self-consciously try and keep my stuff positive. And I am a human being. Like, occasionally I have very negative thoughts. Like they're mostly, I'm happy to say, in my drafts like that, never to see the light of day. And then, like, occasionally I look at them and it's like, oh, delete. So I have negative thoughts. And the social media algorithm definitely feeds on conflict. It feeds on drama. It feeds on us attacking each other. You know what else feeds on drama and attacking each other? Cable news. Then I talk about that too. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was on cable news and I was just asked to comment on someone else's comment, and it's like, oh, this is what we're doing, and then you have like a feeling too. You're like, well, I didn't like that comment, so I guess I'll say something to that effect. But it really is setting us up, and nothing gets solved. Nothing really happens. We all just get more and more upset and mad at each other. I said the other day that we're being manipulated to the financial betterment of various major media organizations. That's 100 times more true for social media, where we're being manipulated to make social media companies money. So try to keep that in mind, please.
And that is a great point, Andrew, because we do have a supporter in the chat who mentioned the fact that you went on Tucker Carlson. Can you please explain to everybody that the importance of going on Tucker Carlson is not to agree with Tucker, but to try to reach his 4 million plus audience that watches his show every day?
Unbelievable that we have to explain this to people.
And being able to not convince them that, immigration this, stolen election that, hey, what do you think about us having no corruption politics or having UBI? Right. And I'd like to think that out of 4 million people, what if 40,000 people hear that message and think, you know what, that's pretty cool. I think I'm going to go to, I'm going to go check out that book Forward. What are your thoughts on the importance of crossing over, even with people that you don't necessarily agree with politically?
We do.
Yeah, I want to tell the story about a volunteer of mine, Carrie Ann, whom I saw in Atlanta. And she's been supporting me for 2 years, and her Republican dad has never had a positive word to say about it. Like, never wanted to hear anything about it. And then I went on Tucker Carlson, and then the next day he calls her and says, hey, I saw your guy on Tucker Carlson, and asked her questions about it, about me, where, like you said, 4 million Americans take their cues from watching Tucker's show. And so if you have an opportunity to go and present a particular case, which, for me, was around open primaries and ranked choice voting, but also we did end up talking about UBI and immigration and some other things. I mean, what would you rather have? Just people who go and see everything by Tucker's worldview go on Tucker, or you want people who will go and present a different worldview to folks that might open them up to some of the structural changes, particularly because if you look at something like open primaries and ranked choice voting, open primaries are really popular among Republicans because Republicans have like this anti-institutional populist sentiment. And the first state to make this change is Alaska, which is a deep red state. And by the way, setting Lisa Murkowski free to do what she wanted is probably one reason why she broke with the party and decided to impeach Donald Trump. So if your mission is to try and make these changes, you probably want to operate in red states as much or more than any other states. And if you want to reach those people so that when you show up, they don't immediately shut down, going on a show like Tucker's is an opportunity. I mean, if we just talk to each other, like the polarization never ends.
That's the thing. People love to live in their little echo chambers, and it's so frustrating. And then they sit there and judge and nitpick as to who you talk to and whose show you go on and who did you have as a guest. Yep. I can't believe you would be like support this person. And it's like, it's really, I'm so sick of it.
And they really turned that into a very big talking point during the presidential campaign. You know, obviously Senator Warren was somebody who was very adamant about, oh no, you should never go on Fox News. Whereas yourself, Tulsi, and Bernie got it and recognized that, no, we need to talk to everybody.
Exactly.
You got to talk to everybody, because if you don't talk to everybody, how are you ever going to convert enough people? Because we are way too divided these days. Yep. And the only way we're going to solve this problem, the only way we're going to get out of our own way is if we try to cast a wide enough net where we say, look, you may disagree on abortion. You may disagree on gun rights. Can we find common ground on the climate? Can we find common ground on corruption? Can we find common ground on voting? Can we find common ground on healthcare? And I'd like to think most people want to find common ground on this. And I think your idea is really the right. I mean, I even said to Jen, as soon as you announced, I said, I got a funny feeling this might work. I just kind of do.
Oh, it's glorious.
Yeah. I'm
going to make you prescient to do my best.
Hey, listen, man, we get a kick out of you. We really do.
Oh,
and
for sure.
You're just a genuine effing person.
Yeah.
And we need more of that in politics. We don't need these standard bearers who do the thumb thing. You know, we need people who actually have new ideas. You never did the thumb thing.
I've been known to give thumbs up to
thumbs
a lot
up.
of
It's different than the point the thumb.
The point the thumb. Oh, good. I'm glad it's different.
Before you go, let's answer this question. What are your thoughts now about the whittled down reconciliation bill?
I'm super sad that it doesn't have prescription drug cost controls in it in its current version. I'm glad that the child tax credit looks like it survived, even if it's only for another year. I mean, we're not sure about the final version, but most people, I believe, already sense that. I'm sad that it's been watered down and whittled down to the extent that it has. Yeah. We're in a tough time, and I'm in the camp that we should be doing more, not less. A lot of these big problems. So if this is the best we get, is the best we get. I will suggest that if you want better than this, like, we need to change this dynamic, because some people are going to hate this, but in my view, this might have been the high watermark in terms of the Democratic Party's ability to pass legislation for the foreseeable. And so if you don't like this high watermark, let's freaking change it, because this high watermark was not high enough in my view.
Right. I actually would say that if I were sitting in Congress right now, I would not vote for this. I wouldn't support it. It's way too, I wouldn't. And it's just not enough.
And a prime example of the big difference between somebody like Jen and somebody like Wasserman Schultz is that Debbie is just going to go along with whatever the corporate establishment wants. And the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of seniors in this district.
Oh my God.
And you want to talk about impoverished, Andrew? You want to talk about people who would so benefit from having vision, dental and hearing covered. And now you're never going to hear a word from Debbie about how, no, we really need to keep this in the bill. never going to hear that. So they are none the wiser. And I think that is this whole idea about, changing things at the grassroots level. And the last thing I want to ask you is, everything is completely broken on Capitol Hill. Most people would agree with that. How important would you say focusing on statewide initiatives are? Obviously, the New York Health Act, whole Washington, CalCare when it comes to healthcare, things like ranked choice voting. The one thing we can say that is good about Florida, albeit the GOP does everything to try to stop it, but the one thing that is good about Florida, we're actually really good about passing ballot initiatives.
More people supported the $15 minimum wage than voted for Trump in our last election.
Yeah.
So we have that, but yeah.
Your thoughts on
around this question, we have to rise up and take advantage of the routes that are available to us. And Congress has been bought and sold. I mean, we all have to acknowledge it. Like the fact that they can't fight the big pharma lobby on this bill is a very clear sign that you're going to have a limit on what you can get done. So we should be pushing that limit, but we should also be pushing that limit locally and at the state level. And ballot initiatives are the answer to a lot of these problems. I'm thrilled that Florida's seen some positive results. The main drive of the Forward Party is open primaries and ranked choice voting, which happen at the state level. And so there's something else. I'll just throw this out there too. There's something called the Fair Representation Act that's been proposed in Congress, which I'm a huge fan of. It kind of goes straight to this multi-party system that, in my mind, is necessary for us to function and see real change, and also, by the way, avoid authoritarianism. But I'm focused on the state level because I think it's more achievable. It's like if you go to Congress and say, hey, pass this law, like at this point, we have to face facts that it's not going to happen. So then what can we do in real life? We can get enough of us together and then pass these ballot initiatives in various places and support local candidates and even some congressional and state level candidates. I'm just going to throw this out as a vision to you all. Imagine if you had one Forward Party / independent senator in the U.S. Senate 13 months from now. Like, could that person be the key figure or fulcrum? It could. It's like if you might need 5 or 6 representatives to have the same effect. But you don't need to win 51% of races to have this kind of influence in a polarized country. You get 1 or 2 senators, 5 or 6 members, and you can be the fulcrum that decides the direction of the country. So I think that's an achievable vision for us. And then if you have that fulcrum, you can make big changes. You can go to the parties and say, hey, like, we'll work with you. You know what we could use is open primaries and ranked choice voting. We need to shift to something multipolar as quickly as possible because this duopoly is going to doom us. It's going to sink us.
There are a couple of good Senate candidates, a few actually. Morgan Harper in Ohio and Erica Smith in North Carolina.
Love Erica. I don't know Morgan, but I'm sure
Morgan's great. Morgan was a BNC slate mate of mine and ran for Congress in 20 and is now running for Senate.
Also, Sheila McCormick, Florida's 20th special election. She supports UBI. Really awesome. And then, of course, what else can you say about India Walton?
India Walton. Really, tomorrow, guys. Big deal.
Really hope tomorrow's a big day. Andrew, one last thing that I do want to say before you go. I can't thank you enough for endorsing Jen and what that meant to our campaign. And since Andrew's here, and I know we have a lot of people watching from the Yang Gang, you guys are absolutely spectacular. I can't say it in any other way. No one put more effort in. No one pounded the pavement more. No one believes in these things. Erica Rhodes.
We had Erica on. She was on, guys. Check out the interview.
You're just a great person, and I know you mean well, and I wish more people got that. Not going to agree on everything, but hats off to you and hats off to the Yang.
And I will say this, if you ever want to have a discussion, we could have an Israel discussion and we could actually really parse it out, because the people on here that have their issues, like, I do tend to agree with them. They know that I do. Like, I've gotten more and more of a self-loathing Jew, unfortunately, which won't serve well in this district, I am sure.
Well, let's see.
But we could definitely, no, I'm saying, like, I have a very big history with this. And as a second generation Florida Jew, it's not easy. But if you ever did, and so guys, this is not, I'm
well, to the greater point about all of this too, it's like, I think we have to get away from the sense that, we have to agree on everything with people that we can still regard as folks that, we either like or can work with. I think about it in my own life, like when you're around other people who maybe your kids go to school with. It's not like if you sit and talk with them, the expectation is like, oh, I believe everything you believe and vice versa. Like, we don't really, we don't really like have that as a standard. It's just when you stick a microphone and a camera on us, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, if I talk to you, then like we have to, you know what I mean? Like I never actually got that memo.
Right.
Like
I'll talk to anybody if I think it will further what I'm trying to do. And that is something that I appreciate about you. You've always been clear about that, and I think that that's what's important. That's how things get done.
Shout out to Matt Skidmore for always covering Andrew up, down, left and right, every which way. Does an amazing job.
I do love me some Yang Gang.
Yeah, really.
But I have a very strong libertarian streak in me. I do.
I think we all do. I think we all agree that there are things about progressive elements that we agree with and libertarian elements that we agree with. But we highly recommend that you go to forwardparty.com.
Yes, guys.
Please get involved.
And you should read the book or cheat like
yes.
me and have Andrew read it to you.
You can even go at a 1.5 speed. No one will know. I don't know what speed
actually, you're right, because that's a good idea. Actually, I could have done that. I actually could have done that because you do talk very calm and even keeled. You're not like a fast talker, so you actually could do it.
Well, we're definitely
I set my pace to soothing. I hope it worked. But yeah,
if
people don't want soothing, they can actually speed it up.
Pages of notes, man. Pages of notes. And I have to shout out two things that I thought were really amusing. One, that you got porn hacked, because I've had that happen to me. And two, that you have a weed named after you. I fully appreciate that.
That's cool.
Third thing, you and I both skipped kindergarten.
Nice. Never learned to share.
And never learned to share. And you and I both were mocked for not being as developed as other people.
Oh.
That definitely happened to me. Maybe it built character in both of us, Jen. Maybe that's why.
I don't know. I used to get AAA brochures in my notebooks. We do more than fix flats.
That's not cool.
To me.
That's highly uncool.
Get away with that now. Oh my God.
Well, we are definitely going to lean on Zach and Julian to get you down here whenever possible. Yes. We would obviously love to connect with you in person, and we really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much for coming on, Andrew.
We hope to see you again in the near future.
Of course. The in-person studio sounds like a lot of fun. I will ping Zach and Julian on that.
I'm working on it.
Listen,
I think I'll be down there the holidays. My in-laws live down in your neck of the woods, so there's a chance I'm down there.
Well, definitely. We'll get together. Thanks, Andrew.
Bye, everyone. Great seeing you. Generational change. You all rock. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, bro.
Bye, everybody.
See you, Andrew. I mean, again.
Okay. And we now also, guys, speaking of good candidates, we were just talking about how important it would be to get candidates in to balance the nonsense that is going on. And so we have somebody who's running who I would like to say, we talk a lot about the importance of both inside and outside strategy. You need people on the inside, as much as we don't agree with how they do their jobs a lot of the time.
As long as they're elected with no corporate special interest money.
It's like we can argue about, but we also need a very robust outside movement. And this particular candidate is someone who comes from that outside movement. And I think that is that's always beneficial, I think, because it's someone who can rally and does understand the importance of the outside movement and working with that. We should be working with them. Our legislators should be working with them to promote these ideas.
He is a local activist, a great leader, and an even greater person. And he is running for Florida's 27th congressional district with no corporate special.
And for anybody who not from here, that was Shalala's district until she fortunately lost.
So he's now running against Maria Vera Salazar. Angel Montalvo, welcome to Generational Change.
Hi, thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me on. How's it going?
Yeah, we're good. So you and I first met, I don't know if it was something to do with either Labor Community Alliance, 350 South Florida, Extinction Rebellion, any of those?
It was
Jack
at our
Lieberman.
What's that?
It was because of Jack.
It was actually at our coffee shop with Sunrise folks. I think you were meeting there about your campaign as well.
I remember that.
Somewhere further north, if I'm not mistaken. But
I thought I knew
you
you before that. I thought I knew you from when we planned the rallies for the first presidential debates.
Maybe then there actually, because I was pretty involved. Like you're saying like the Democratic primary debates here in Miami.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So probably there, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that you're very active, and so talk a little bit about what organizations you're like involved with and what issues really are motivating you to step into the inner strategy as opposed to being on the outside.
Yeah. There's some buzzing. I'm not sure if that's on my end, but when I think about everything that I do in my personal life, as well as like, you know, organizing, I try to ground it in why I'm doing it. I was born and raised in Miami, in the district actually, and being involved in a lot of different organizations, doing advocacy for immigrants groups or working with communities who are underserved, like unhoused communities, and working with the tenants who you know, have predatory like landlords, and just a wide spectrum of different organizations. I realized that all of these issues, we didn't have the resources to do what needed to be done. And legislatively, whether we like it or not, that's the way that we have to go. And we have to understand the nature of the system in order to be able to actually materially move and things in the direction of like people. And so centering that around the reality of what we're facing, like as a vulnerable city in terms of like the climate, we're facing a planetary crisis, and we are one of the most vulnerable districts in the country. And we have to really approach this from a place of like making sure that we're centering what we're doing on the people of the community and having that conversation. So, for example, I'm actually involved with the Democratic Executive Committee of the Miami-Dade County. And in tandem of that, I'm on the board of the Progressive Caucus of Miami. And so those are kind of like the groups that I am involved with on an electoral and political level. And then I'm involved with groups with like, I'm a leader I'm a member of the leadership of the Sunrise Movement here in Miami. I'm involved with the Labor Community Alliance. I'm involved with different, like the Florida Immigrant Coalition, groups that represent different advocacy groups. And the idea being that it shouldn't be those groups begging for breadcrumbs from elected officials. It should be elected officials inviting and taking direction from the groups that know what the people need. You know, whether that be a pathway to citizenship, whether it be like canceling student debt, whether that be addressing the planetary crisis. Like, we have the solutions, we have the resources, and it's a matter of not necessarily expecting the current elected officials to act based on what we want, but rather we have to have the sense to say, they're not going to listen to us. It's kind of a waste of energy. So we have to out-organize and run our candidates. And like you were saying with Andrew earlier, like, yeah, absolutely. I'm involved with the Democratic leadership here in Miami because I understand that we need school board, city, county commission, progressives, strong progressives, and we can do it. I believe it. You made a point to how like progressive policies are actually popular in Florida. I think that people in our state and in our district haven't been given an alternative, and that once they do, I think there's going to be like whiplash with like how quickly we're going to be able to not just change the narrative locally, but you know, here in South Florida, especially generally, we are a large group of Democrats that we're representing. And it's like the third largest state in the country. So if we can do a lot of real deep organizing here, inside and outside, labor, you know, special advocacy groups, I think we'll be in a good position. So that's kind of
I just want to point out, I'm sorry, Angel, but I just got to point out for people, here is a key point that you should look for when deciding who to vote for. You want to vote for the person that has the megaphone hanging up on the wall behind them, because that is a sign that this is somebody who is willing to speak loudly on your behalf. I'm just saying, like, it couldn't be more like apropos that you're sitting there with that on the wall.
Yeah, it's a totem in a way. I think with the work that we have to do, if we're serious about it and sober about it, we have to understand and accept and address the reality that we are going to have to be in very uncomfortable situations. It's like Noam Chomsky says, if you want progress, something to the effect of, if you want progress, it's not feel good activism and work. We have to say some hard truths about a lot of like very powerful individuals and entities. And so, for me, it's kind of like you got to surrender to the movement and what needs to be done, and like how we actually can meet the moment. And we have to like be loud and proud. And in Miami, people are so afraid, like the Democratic Party is so afraid of like what names are going to be called. And, I think just leaning into that, like, we're not going to back down. We're not afraid of, the Democrats. We're not afraid of Republicans, Salazar. We're not afraid of the Proud Boys. Like, do your worst. And that really resonates when I talk to people, because it's like people are over it. And if we don't do something, we're going to have riots.
Not that I know as of this moment. Angel, if you can talk about the fact that District 27 is actually very unique. It's actually one of the...
It's very purple.
And it's not just that it's purple. It's the fact that it's actually fairly not gerrymandered. It's actually very much like a...
It's a normal shape for most districts.
And the overall distance that it covers is actually... if you really think about it, it's actually a district size-wise that you could pretty much cover the entire thing if you really wanted to. And if you could just talk about the importance of, the door knocking and what that means, and how this is really a true grassroots campaign where, we're going to be trying to reach every single voter in the district, which again, like I said, based on the size of the district, I think it's actually very possible if you have a lot of, boots on the ground, if you will.
And I'm glad that you bring all of that up. Geographically, this is why I say it's personal for me. I was born and raised in the district, in the heart of the district, kind of in Little Havana, but I've been doing a lot of looking into it. And all of these places that are I've been looking at to the map are places that I've been multiple times throughout my life. So the district and the makeup of it, and the nature, from Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, who was the congresswoman before Shalala, before Salazar. She was the first person in this district after it was redistricted, and now we're in a situation where it is again going to be redistricted. So we actually are not 100% sure of what the makeup is going to be as somebody who is coming from outside of the political establishment. I'm not waiting for cues from the higher ups. So I just decided to run a long time ago, and I've been working on the infrastructure. We're running a lean campaign. I'm really excited. There's an awesome group of people that I'm working with like every day, and because I'm tapped into those grassroots networks, whether that be like the DSA or the Dream Defenders or the Sunrise Movement or the Labor Community Alliance, even the Democrats and the Progressive Democrats, we're at a really good place that with our just foundation right now, we'll have the people power to be able to do the legwork that you're saying. And we have to do that because of like the nature of like where we are in relation to where they are and the kind of resources and financing. But I feel really confident about it. It's really exciting. I could talk for a while about why this seat is pretty unique for a couple of reasons, but.
Well, we have no doubt, as friend of the show John Holder would say, there is obviously the ominous prospect.
Oh, good God, I hope
Shalala
not. For
again.
the love of all that is holy.
There is no question that it's very likely she will, simply because
are you
what else
kidding me?
But the question becomes, certainly there will be a lot of corporate candidates that will be running. As far as you know, are you the only non-corporate candidate that is running for the seat as it stands right now?
As it stands, as far as I know, I'm the only candidate who's filed. There was another candidate who filed and then switched her out, Janelle Perez. She's running, I can't remember which state house district.
State Senate, I believe. I believe she's state Senate, if I remember correctly.
Senate, okay. So, so as far as I understand, I don't know what the motivations. I don't really want to speculate. I have heard that it may have been an establishment figure, that kind of made the way. Because again, this is like a census redistricting. we're looking at a couple different maybe things that are not necessarily what we might expect. I've heard that maybe if it changes, Mercoso Powell might run in the race. There's a lot of different avenues, but they represent the same thing. I recently actually heard, I think today or yesterday, where Shalala was on the news, and she was kind of praising the neutered Build Back Better package. It tells you what you need to know. For my end, every single person that I've ever told about or has talked about her does that like out loud groan. And I don't want to characterize anybody. This isn't personal for me. This is more about like who is committed to the working class people and who has a history and the trust of the community to do that. And in my mind, that's me. And I have the people power to show it. And, over time, we'll be able to do that instead of just talk about it,
Here's what I know. It certainly isn't the person who ran the Clinton Foundation. Okay. I know that much is true. That is not the person looking out for your best
And that
interest.
is not the person who should be running.
Oh,
so
good
because
God.
you are running a non-corporate campaign, what would you say are the top 3 issues that you will be fighting for the residents of District 27?
Right. Well, the cornerstone of what the campaign is, it has to do with like the planetary crisis. And the reason for that is because it is like a nexus for every other issue. Right up there, we talk about sea level rise. We talk about the algae blooms. We can talk about the aquifers and the fresh water that's being pushed out, pollution, the acidification of the ocean. You can go down the list, and that's just the beginning. The septic system. So with that comes the housing crisis, because people are being pushed out and climate gentrification. And this is one of those examples where these very basic things that need to be addressed, climate gentrification, maybe the people in the community maybe not be aware of what it means, but I find it very difficult within the leadership of the Democratic Party here to even have that conversation. It's almost like a bad word. So going back to it, so I would say climate, housing, healthcare. Healthcare is a human right, and I go so far as to say, housing is a part of healthcare. You can't get better from a cold or a sprained ankle if you don't have a home. So that's where I'm coming from. So everything is kind of intertwined. A big aspect of that also has to do with immigration. We need to have a clear pathway to citizenship for people. It's a human right to be able to seek asylum and migrate. And that focus on like human rights and like whether or not the United States at home and abroad is observing, human rights. That if they're not being observed, we don't, like, the entire foundation of our society is like a farce. And it's just like there's no even pretense for like the rampant violations of capital, So that's kind of where I'm at. So I want to do a little bit more of an emphasis. When we're talking about running for a national seat, there's like international implications, and there's a lot of fear mongering and a lot of like manipulation about issues. But ultimately, we observe human rights here. We establish healthcare as a human right, housing and democratic practices. And then we make sure that is the case for every single person, and like talking about COVID, for example, COVID relief is a big one. But again, it ties into healthcare. So we can't have a vaccine apartheid. And that gives us also the framework to be able to talk about there is a global apartheid. You have the incredibly wealthy and the incredibly poor. And so, yeah, I can go on.
No, the fact that Big Pharma is basically able to be not providing for the least of us, the least of these, it's sickening. And the fact that we live in a country that allows Big Pharma to do that and not give vaccines to people that don't have the money to pay for it is grotesque. It is against everything we should be doing in this country. It's gross.
And I do think, speaking to where we are as stands today, especially in the state of Florida, and whether it is the former representative or the current representative, Representative Salazar is, just somebody who, if you know anything about her, she's not somebody who is, from the grassroots. She is not somebody who is going to be working on behalf of working people. And
she's not marching for $15 an hour, people.
no, she's just marching on the next career block along her ascent, if you will. And so we don't need representation like that, because that isn't representation. We need public servants. And you, Angel, are absolutely somebody who would be a public servant. And so with that said, any final pitch that you want to share with people?
Guys, support.
MontalvoforCongress.com. We highly recommend that you check it out. The floor is yours, my friend. Your final pitch, and we'll get this out as soon as we end our live stream.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Angel Montalvo. The website is montalvoforcongress.com. Sign up to be a volunteer. If you can sign up and do a donation, a contribution to the campaign, it means the world. We're in this for the people. We're in this to win it. We need to have actual change and not back down and not be censored and not be afraid.
That's awesome. So, and guys, here's the thing, even for people who can't afford to give, if you go to someone's website, follow them on their social media handles, and share it. And those kinds of things do help promote when if you don't have money. Thank you so much, Angel.
We always love a good dog bark.
We do. And I'm just glad mine's sleeping.
Angel, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Bye,
Thanks,
Angel.
brother. Bye-bye. And so again,
that's what a real activist looks like, by the
100%.
way. Every time I've seen him, he's been like screaming into
Well,
a
he's
microphone.
usually somebody who has a bullhorn with him.
Yes.
So he is definitely, he is somebody who represents the downtrodden,
Definitely.
and the people who need the most
Absolutely.
help. And that's what we need more of. This whole idea of, well, who's going to step up? Well, Angel's stepping up, and more people need to step up. That's really how it's going to happen.
We need people that are willing to just put themselves out there to do the right thing.
Yeah. And
That's
also
what we need.
More people to be on, community boards, school boards, even the state house and the state senate. I know a lot of people don't want to think about going to Tallahassee, but
I wouldn't.
Change is only going to happen if we're willing to put in the work. And so we're doing what we can.
What do we have coming up?
We do have.
Okay, so
for
this
those of
was an
you-
anomaly, guys. We are going to stick with doing a Sunday afternoon, Wednesday evening schedule. That is going to be the
Correct.
schedule. This was the anomaly because,
And
Andrew
next
Yang.
week, we will have one more exception for a Thursday, but that's because it's
Veterans Day.
That's a big day.
And we have Oliver Stone on Veterans Day.
But this Wednesday, for you Yang Gang and Forward Party supporters out there,
Yes.
we've got a 2-for this week for you
Yes.
guys. We had Andrew Yang this evening. We've got Scott Santons, the original UBI, the OG UBIer,
UBIer.
who is coming on Wednesday. He's making his return. He is going to talk about the need for you MMTers out there, for UBI and MMT to come together.
That's
what I'm
nice.
talking
So that
about.
will be Wednesday. And we have interview with candidate Cynthia Mendez. I don't know where is she?
She's in Rhode Island,
Okay.
running for lieutenant governor,
Woo.
along with.
See, now there is a state I would run a statewide office for.
Yeah, because it's not.
I
that
just
big.
drive across it in half an hour.
Yeah, so if Jen ever moves to a state like Rhode Island,
I'll
or
run for statewide
Maine
office.
or New Hampshire,
Anywhere that I
Yeah.
could get across in a couple of hours,
Yeah.
I'm there.
any of those states, that is yes, John, that is correct. Unfortunately, that is a rivalry that.
We're not going to go there.
Yeah.
Stop. You know what? Stop being a pot stirrer.
Yeah,
Be nice. Stop being a pot stirrer.
Jen's heart belongs to Steve anyway. So,
I love
Steve.
Steve.
You're not going to win that fight, Scott.
Okay, so guys, and then next Sunday, Rania Kalik
And
coming
we
on.
may have a very special guest joining her as well. So we'll
Oh,
see.
I don't know about this.
All
right.
Significant other, somebody who's very important, potentially.
All right, we'll have to talk about that. Oh, okay, yeah.
There you go.
All right. Yes, we might be able to get an Assange update from Stella Morris. So we're working on that. But Rania Kalik will be here next Sunday. And then Veterans Day, we will be having Danny Scherzen and Oliver Stone.
We're getting booked up. Oh, and we're going to be making some appearances on some other shows. So that's coming back. That'll be
Oh.
fun. We are going back on Fire Breathing Rob's podcast.
Oh,
We're
okay.
also going on the John Brown Leftist podcast. So if any of you out there want us to, give our thoughts about stuff, just give us a ring. And maybe Jen will go on Yang Speaks.
I would go on. Well, I've been on not Yang's show, but I've been on with Nerds for Humanity.
Yeah,
I've been on with
Tom's
the
great.
Yang gang people.
Yes, 100%. So we will keep it going. And so just in case you guys really do appreciate our content
And you want to
what we're
support,
doing
which would be great,
is good.
get the Lulu sticker. I do have one that is set to go out. I haven't forgotten my most recent Patreon. If you're looking, if you're watching, I promise you, you will get your stuff. I'm in the process of moving, and it is all encompassing and downsizing.
Very much so.
It is all encompassing. I can't even begin to tell you. And so I am sort of living as like out of boxes in some cases, and everything's out of control. So just bear with me. I will get all Patreons what is due.
The
That will
last
happen.
real third-party movement that we had in the United States
Oh,
was
yes.
by this man, who I believe was our greatest president.
But
My
isn't
opinion.
that the reason we ended up with Woodrow Wilson?
Yeah, you could make that argument.
I
but
could
again-
make that argument.
But again, this is coming from the real bull moose,
Oh my God.
the real leader.
He
the
never
man-
rode a moose, by the way. That never happened.
No,
That's
but
an
he-
urban legend.
no,
It never happened.
but
He
he
never
is-
rode a moose.
But he is the original environmental president.
Yes,
And so
that
to
is
me,
true.
That's as important as anything.
But he did not ride a moose.
No. And he wasn't accidental.
I know this because you probably, I would venture to say you couldn't ride a moose.
Probably not.
I'd like to know if anybody has ever ridden a moose, because I got to tell you, I've seen moose and they don't seem like they would tolerate that. And they're quite large. So I don't see how you could, but
We're very grateful for everybody who showed up.
yes,
tonight,
Teddy
liked,
Roosevelt.
commented, and
Peter loves
shared.
Teddy.
It certainly is. It's great to see the support.
And you will start saying, look, I'm going to be building out a studio. I have a space for a studio. It's going to take us a little while. And in the meantime, we're going to have to find some sort of setup just in the house.
Imagine if you're able to pull that off in 6 weeks.
I'm not. It's not happening in 6 weeks.
Well, I'm just saying, if Andrew does,
Yeah, that would
want
be
to come
cool,
and do
but
it in
I'm
the
not.
studio.
We're not. We have way too much to do with the studio space. So, guys, I have
Never say never.
basically, I have a single car garage that we are going to put AC in. I can't convert it because of the association,
I could
but
check you.
I'm going to actually have a studio space that will be just studio. I'm going to put the sound stuff on the walls and have it set up. But until we have that up and running, it's just going to be, we'll see.
We're doing what we can, but we appreciate you guys. It's going to be a short turnaround. We'll see you Wednesday. Have a great night.
Bye, y'all.